All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who are west of the Mississippi, good afternoon. People in the Mountain Time and Pacific Time, like myself, good morning. We are very excited to host you all today on this webinar to discuss how to never do inventory again with the circTRAK Shelf Manager. We are pretty new to this. This is being our second webinar using this interface, so we're still trying to get used to a little bit of the how-tos and the ins and outs of it. And this may be your first webinar using GoToMeeting, so we just want to do some quick housekeeping on the interface to make sure that everyone is on board and point out a few details before we get started here. So this should be what you're looking at with your GoToMeeting interface. First thing we want to point out, everyone is on mute right now. We do that just so that way we cut down the background noise. We don't hear anyone's cats or dogs in the background or gardeners or anything like that. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions that you would like to ask either myself or Gretchen when we get to discussing the content, there is an ability to ask questions. If you click the little questions icon there, it'll open up a text box. You can go ahead and drop a question in at the bottom there. It will come directly to me. If it's a fairly quick question, I may answer it in line, but we're going to save most of the heavy content questions for the end and make it more of a dialogue with Gretchen and myself. Any question that's asked throughout this webinar, we will also follow up with an email. So if we don't get to your question, if we get too many from the audience, we will answer your question, whether it's in this presentation or afterwards in a follow-up email. One other thing, there are some handouts associated with this presentation. So in the little documents tray that you see there, there are 3 PDFs that you can download at your leisure. We can also send those out to you via email if you aren't able to download them for some reason. Just send us an email after this webinar, webinar@tech-logic.com, and we'll be able to send those out to you. So real quick, my name is Anthony Frey. I am the Director of Marketing for TechLogic. I've been so for about a year now. Before this position, I was the Senior Solution Specialist covering the Pacific region. So any libraries who are in California all the way up to Alaska, I have probably crossed paths with you at some point in the last 3 or 4 years. And while I was in my sales role, the circTRAK Shelf Manager was my absolute favorite product to go into libraries and to discuss because it is such a revolutionary product and it can change the workflow of your library so dramatically. It was always exciting to go out in person and see a library handle this unit. So I'm very excited to be participating in this webinar today. As I said, we're doing Wednesday webinars now. If you participate in one of our future webinars, it will probably be with another person, at least for a month or so, because my wife and I are expecting our first child here in the next couple of weeks. So while in my role as Director of Marketing, I'm very excited to be hosting this series. But moving forward, I may have to take a temporary hiatus. But with us today to discuss the circTRAK Shelf Manager and all the amazing things that it can do for your library, we have Miss Gretchen Freeman, who is our Principal Librarian and Strategist. So Gretchen, I will hand the microphone off to you.
Thank you, Anthony. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the TechLogic Wednesday webinar series. And thanks for doing some social distancing with us for about 45 minutes. I wish I could see you all, and thank you for your work in libraries, especially right now when you're serving your communities, I'm sure, in very different ways. My friend has joined her first online book club at the library called the Pants On Book Club. How resilient and how creative are libraries? I recognize many of the libraries who are tuning in today, perhaps from my post at Salt Lake County Library or here as a librarian on staff at TechLogic. We may have talked about RFID implementation or other projects. My favorite topics are looking at workflow and process changes during and after a technology implementation. Most of you will recognize TechLogic from its leadership in automated material handling, self-checkout, and RFID. TechLogic invented and installed the first AMH system for Greensboro Public Library, North Carolina in 1998. That system is still in operation 22 years later. TechLogic's unique throw and go book drops were certainly hands down favorites for our patrons because nothing changed. They take a handful of materials and place them in the slot just like they always did. Along with these 4 unique self-checkout solutions from TechLogic, they've helped hundreds of libraries with RFID conversions. So the RFID product we're talking about today is the circTRAK Shelf Manager. I assume that most of you attending today already have converted to RFID, so you know its circulation benefits for multi-item checkout and check-in. It has built-in item security, and it's a faster way to process on an AMH or sorting system. But the icing on that RFID cake is that long-awaited promise to improve shelf and collection management, and that's our topic today. circTRAK Shelf Manager has been delivering on that promise for years. In fact, it shifted the paradigm for shelf management in many public libraries, and it has garnered 2 Modern Library Awards for creative solutions for libraries. circTRAK Shelf Manager consists of a battery-powered RFID handheld wand, shown here in the illustration, and a unique circTRAK Shelf Manager software, which resides on a Surface tablet. In the stack, circTRAK delivers 4 broad categories of functions: locating lists of items, verifying that security on your RFID tags is active, or gathering up barcodes for traditional inventory or in-house use counts. Today, we're focusing on what we recommend as the primary use of circTRAK, which is dynamic status check, and particularly using that as a replacement for inventory. Whether or not your library currently performs inventories, here are a few reasons why inventory should be largely discontinued by RFID libraries. They're time and labor intensive, we know that. They're a huge investment in one-by-one barcode reads of items on the shelves, and then the follow-up ILS processing. They're a time-sensitive snapshot, so only what's on the shelf at the moment you scan is what's captured. So it means that inventory results are almost immediately out of date. Things start to shift again, and within weeks, you have some of the same problems you had before. Public library collections also churn or transition in and out quickly. If you think about circulation activity every day, or about regular weeding and replacement work that you're doing, your collections are moving and churning. And they need to be kept dynamic and fresh for our patrons. And finally, inventory requires a process of manual cleanup after the fact. So after you've processed your barcode lists on the ILS, now you have a list of exceptions to deal with back out at the shelves. For many of those reasons, many libraries don't do inventories very frequently. What I suggest is that an RFID library shift from traditional inventory mindset to active shelf management. And with RFID, you have the capabilities that you have never had with barcodes. They simply don't support what we're talking about today. So the goal is still to clean up the catalog regularly, and you can accomplish that by shelf management. We avoid that large labor cost of doing a one-time inventory, and we invest a fraction of that labor in regular shelf management. You also are leveraging this one more way to leverage that large investment in RFID and extend that investment. So it's really the final delivery on promise of RFID to improve customer service and help us locate or remove materials to keep the collection fresh. So what is shelf management? Shelf management is managing the physical items on our shelves. So as opposed to collection management, where you're talking about content and how we're managing the content on our shelves, this is more about the physical items. Our goal is a clean and reliable catalog of the collection. We'll see in a minute how quickly we can scan a section of the collection to check for exceptions on the shelf. circTRAK is simple to use, and there's little or no learning curve for all levels of staffing. There are no lists to load. I want to emphasize that. You're not doing a list load, and you're not dealing with printed reports, which is where most of us have been. The scanning with circTRAK will produce a list and alerts of every exception item on the shelf in real-time ILS searches. That's why it's called dynamic status check. Your ILS may use slightly different terms for exceptions listed on the screen. What we know is that they should not be on our shelves in these statuses. So they represent items that should be at another branch or are misplaced on the shelf, or in the worst case, they're still attached to a patron record. The case of claimed return is still checked out. Each of those statuses is the result of an action that didn't end up quite as planned. And every library accumulates them in the normal course of business. So until now, the exceptions could only be cleared with manual reports that we processed at the shelves or infrequent inventories. Both of those methods are limited in scope, and they're quickly outdated, and they're a big labor cost. So let's take a look at how circTRAK performs dynamic status check in 4 steps. First step, a staff member connects circTRAK to the library's ILS via a secure Wi-Fi connection. There's no timing or continuity like there is with inventory or a requirement to scan the entire collection. That's worth emphasizing. You're going out into the stacks, the staff can start scanning a range or collection in any order at any time. Total flexibility. In step 2, circTRAK sends a SIP query to your ILS asking for the current status of each item that it has seen on the shelf, and then it listens for the response. All of this happening in millisecond speed. Next, the ILS returns the status of each item to circTRAK, and it checks the status to determine if the status is a normal in or on shelf or available status, or it's something else. So circTRAK is checking all the statuses that are returned at the same time coming from the ILS. And then finally, if the status is an exception, circTRAK alerts the staff member with an audible and an on-screen alert. The staff member can use title and barcode information to pull exceptions from the shelves. Some ILSs also return call number information in the response. Each exception is removed from the shelf and placed on a book truck, usually by category, and then resolved behind the scenes by circulation staff. You can update the status of any of these materials then with a check-in to return it to its proper in or available status. Remember that in some cases, the patron record may still be attached, and there may need to be a remedy such as a fine waived or a hold queue adjusted. Let's look at a short clip of circTRAK performing its dynamic status check. I'm in the shelves and I'm going to start scanning with circTRAK. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the list populating of items red. When the screen flashes red, it's found an exception and writes it to the list on the left called the found list. So you'll see my exceptions gathering on the left. I'm finding a book still checked out, missing item, an item that's been deleted from the collection, 2 items that should be on my hold shelf. So it tells me the status of the items, and I can remove those for processing. So libraries such as Queens Library in New York adopt circTRAK system-wide for problem solving. circTRAK becomes an active partner for staff whenever an item isn't where it's supposed to be. So for example, Queens uses it to replace printed missing and in transit reports. An item may have been incorrectly routed, or it was misshelved by a helpful patron, or the call number on the spine doesn't match the call number on the catalog, or the item left the library without being checked out. In any case, the missing status becomes a friend instead of a nagging to-do list. And it's a list, I might add, that we often check multiple times at the stacks in the same places we've already checked before. So for example, when you assist a patron to find an item, or you're pulling your holds list, or you're gathering weeds, if you don't find the item on the shelf where it should be, immediately change that status to missing. That way, you have a chance now to find those, and along with all the other exceptions, the next time you do a circTRAK scan. How long do you keep them in a missing status? That depends on your library's policy and timeline. At some point, libraries delete those from their catalog. So instead of a massive one-time cleanup from inventory, you are scanning for missing materials on an ongoing basis, and can use those to fill holds or avoid replacing the items or remove them. So what if during your deletion process, you inadvertently delete a missing item that's still on your shelves? In our former barcode world, there was no way to find these items. Once they were removed from the catalog, they'll never appear on another report. They're gone. But with RFID and circTRAK, they're rescued on the shelves. As you scan with circTRAK, it can read an active RFID tag still in a deleted item and sends its query to the ILS. Now, this is something that you thought was missing and gone from the collection. You went through a deletion process, but the tag on that item is still on the shelves and still active. So the ILS returns a title not found message, or a 0-0 status. The staff member can retrieve that item on the shelf by using its barcode number. And at that point, according to your practice, collection librarians can return those items to the catalog, so they're findable again through the catalog, or remove them from the collection. So finding those missing or deleted items, as Salt Lake County Library has done for years with circTRAK, saves thousands of hours of staff time and dollars looking for materials. They call it a treasure hunt. Remember that there's another part of that treasure hunt too. The claimed return or still checked out items are linked to patron records. Finding those on the shelves saves staff time dealing with calls from patrons or patrons' frustration with library processes. If claimed returns are a chronic problem in one of your branches or libraries, you can also use circTRAK to scan book trucks before they're shelved and make sure everything is checked in before it goes out. Finally, let's see circTRAK in action and give you an idea of the speed of scanning at the shelves. So your staff will find many other uses for circTRAK, and I promise it won't gather dust in the back room. circTRAK Shelf Manager list price is $5,600, but as a webinar participant today, you'll receive a promotional price at $49.95. We hope that you'll consider it for purchase in the near future. Using TechLogic's circTRAK Shelf Manager is the most efficient way to do active shelf management to keep the catalog clean and improve patron service. Hey, thanks for tuning into our Wednesday webinar series. Let's turn to your questions.
All right, we have a number of questions. First off, thank you, Gretchen. Let's start off here at the beginning with the first question we got. How often should I scan the collection? Is there a frequency that we would recommend?
Good question. Since circTRAK scanning is easy to do, I'd suggest that you scan regularly rather than making an event. Just work it into your regular workflow and keep the catalog updated and any patron issues proactively resolved. One branch I know scans a 100,000 item collection monthly. Sounds like a lot of work, but it goes quickly, and the manager has assigned ranges to each shelver, and they're asked to scan their ranges during the course of the month at any time at the end of their shifts. And then they keep a checklist of which ranges have been completed, and by the end of the month, they've scanned the collection. You'll decide how often is a profitable interval for you to scan, and just work that into your normal workflow. It's easy and effective.
The next question we got, Gretchen, is can you discuss how the circTRAK can help with weeding?
Oh yeah, sure. We have a slide, I think, Anthony.
Yes, jump.
It definitely can be used for weeding or finding what I call weed candidates. So you're usually gathering your weed report in the ILS, as you normally do. And in the ILS, create a batch that can change item statuses. So do a batch change to an unavailable status, whatever that might be. Perhaps you create a status called weed. At the next regular circTRAK scanning, we'll find all of those candidates. Any of them that are on the shelves will be found on a continual basis. And then we would perhaps pull those and put them on the bottom shelf of the truck as weed candidates and handle those as you normally would. They might go back to your collection librarian for review. A secondary way to handle weeds is to load a list and scan what you can do, it really depends on the number of weed candidates that you're pulling. But it's easy enough to put them into an available unavailable status, and then just pull them as you're scanning.
All right. Third question, kind of piggybacking off of that, what about pulling holds? Can you speak to the circTRAK and how it can assist in that process?
Sure. I wish I could say it's a magic wand and that you wave it over the building and it would find every hold on the shelf. That's not the case, and I don't recommend using it for your holds pick list for several reasons. One is that holds are widely dispersed through the library, and so the scanning shelves would take more time than finding holds manually as you move from collection to collection. Secondly, sometimes you can substitute a different edition of a title to fill a hold. It might be sitting next to the title edition you were looking for. You find a different edition, and you can force fill the hold. People are simply better at doing that. And then three, I would say holds pick lists are split up across your staff. You usually are going after the list with more than one staff member and can hand out portions of the list. So this is the one report I would suggest that you still process manually in paper or with your mobile circ device.
Another question's come in a couple times. Does the circTRAK pick up every barcode or every RFID tag?
Well, remember, when we did traditional inventory, we were very careful about scanning each barcode so that it's processed on the ILS. RFID is a very different technology, and it does not read in a linear fashion. So it's not picking up items on the shelf as we go down the shelf. It's really reading in a sphere or a globe fashion. And it is subject to interference, or can be subject to interference. So if you're using dynamic status check, you're scanning quickly to find exceptions. If you miss getting a barcode or reading an item this time, you can pick it up the next time. So you don't have to be as concerned about every barcode on the shelf. And I would say do the scanning quickly, do it often, and pick up the items that you pick up each time. Remember, exceptions are the exception on the shelves. So you don't need to worry about every barcode.
The next question, in the video that we showed, it looks like they were using the circTRAK in their DVD collection and in their children's section with some smaller, narrow books, kind of merging two questions together. Gretchen, can you speak on how the circTRAK can assist in areas of your collection that the books are a little smaller, or you're in metal, how it works with metal shelving? What are some workarounds that the circTRAK can present to libraries using this unit?
Sure. Anthony, I think I have another slide, and we can speak to those kinds of conditions. So RFID, as I mentioned, can experience interference from metal, for one thing, and there may be narrow books where you would like to have a better read. So the wand has what's called boost mode. You can see that on the picture on the left, where it boosts the signal power and gives you a little bit more read power, perhaps for those narrow book collections, children's collections. You could try that. It doesn't mean that RFID isn't finding the tags 100% of the time. So, and it would act the same way the next read. You can use the boost mode, or as that second illustration shows, the wand is designed to be inserted into materials if that were something you wanted to do. Here again, they're reading DVDs on the shelf. I would certainly try it first on the spines, or as you saw in the video, where they were flipping materials forward on DVDs in bins. Try those and see how those work for you, but you can go back on boost mode or inserting that blade between items. Most of the time, though, you want to be scanning, as this picture shows, with the wand against the spines of the book. The chances are good that if you missed an item this time, you'll pick it up on the next scan, especially if you're in an active shelving area.
Next question, can you inventory just a single collection, like just children's collection, just DVDs? Can you speak to that workflow, Gretchen?
Sure. I've had libraries ask that question. I would say it may be worth an inventory in a collection where you intend to replace missing titles. And DVDs may be a good candidate for that. So you want to do barcode gathering, and you might then use circTRAK for a slower, more careful scanning to gather all those barcodes. I would not recommend it for an entire library, but only areas where you're going to process that missing list into replacements for the titles. And remember too, if in fact you missed a barcode during inventory, it was processed through the ILS as a missing item. If a missing status is applied, it can be found during an exception scan, dynamic scan, or even if you delete the item, you can still pick it up by scanning statuses. You'll find it as a deleted item. So there's a fallback we simply didn't have with barcodes.
Question we got from a couple of different librarians. Can circTRAK work with any RFID tag supplied by a different vendor, or do they have to be TechLogic RFID tags?
RFID tags have followed an industry standard for about 15 years. That standard, ISO 15693, is the standard for tags, and it doesn't matter what vendor is supplying them. They'll be the same ISO tag, and yes, they can be read. A good question to ask is whether you have generations of tags in your collection. In other words, you started with one type of tag and you've moved to a different type of tag. It's worth testing those generations of tags, and TechLogic can do that and confirm tag readability with just a few sample tags or materials. So think back as to how long you've been using tags and whether there might be different tags in the collection. That's really more the question than whether or not they can be read.
Another question that came in, Gretchen, can the circTRAK be used to check in or check out materials?
circTRAK can be used. There's a capability to have it check in materials on the shelf as you find them in a checked out status. There's two caveats to that. One is that it does not reset security as a normal check-in would do. So the item could still be in a security off state. The second thing that doesn't happen is a check against the holds list. So against holds and trapping holds. That's such a dynamic process, and this isn't serving as a circulation interface. It's really looking for those exceptions on the shelf. So no, I wouldn't suggest it yet anyway as a circulation device, but we certainly have had the request for that to be able to happen. I would still pull materials off and check them in the normal way on my ILS.
Unless there are any other questions that come trickling here in the last few minutes, this may be the last question that we have, Gretchen. Can the circTRAK find all exceptions as well as an uploaded list of items at the same time, or does it only operate with one function at a time? And can you speak to the workflow that we recommend if you were looking for both exceptions and a list of items?
The answer is no, it won't do both functions at the same time, but you really have to shift your mindset to how can I make the list of items I'm looking for into exceptions. So instead of loading the list, I process the list in the ILS and create exception statuses, and those can be as unique as you would wish. You can create exception statuses, and whatever exception list you're pulling, change it to an exception status, and it'll be pulled the next time every time you scan. That's the nice thing too, is every time you're scanning, you're picking up any exception on the shelf. So it's not a one-time list that we're looking for. Just switch your thinking into how can I create exception statuses and let circTRAK do its work.
All right, unless there are any questions that come in here in the next couple seconds, we have reached the end. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. If you have any additional questions that come up after you're able to sit and discuss with your colleagues or think about it for a little bit, you are more than welcome to email those questions to both Gretchen and I at webinar@tech-logic.com. Like I said at the beginning, we will also be following up with every question that was asked with an email, just so that way you have it documented how we responded to those questions that we received during the presentation. And for anyone who wasn't able to attend the webinar, either a colleague or a friend in the library industry who you think this may be beneficial for, we will be posting a video recording of this presentation at our website. In a follow-up email that's coming out to you all in about an hour after this presentation, it will have the web address, but it's also listed down there at the bottom of the slide there, tech-logic.com/education portal. Also within that email that will be coming to you all will be a link to our video archive, so you can see other videos that were posted there, and you will be receiving the promotional coupon that Gretchen mentioned for the specialty pricing of the circTRAK if you are to purchase or you feel that it's a good solution for your library here in the near future. But other than that, again, thank you for your time, and thank you, Gretchen, for leading the discussion today. We hope that all of you stay safe and stay healthy and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.